So Iran hit Iraq with a bunch of ballistic missiles. It's been reported. And why did they hit Iraq? Well, they hit Erbil, which is in Iraq's Kurdistan region. And this came a few days after 2 Iranians had been killed. Okay? So this was published on March 8th. Iran says IRGC members killed in Israeli missile strike in Syria and that it vows revenge. What is the IRGC? The IRGC is a branch of Iran's armed forces. It's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's one of the most elite forces in Iran. And Israel bombed Syria. I know this is so complicated, but for people who don't get the situation, because there's a Cold War in the Middle East. So again, I'm gonna say this very simply and then go into the details. Israel bombed Syria, and it killed 2 Iranians from the IRGC. In response, Iran bombed the Israelis in Iraq's Kurdistan region. Okay, I know it's a lot to wrap your head around because that's the situation. But this is Erbil, just so you have an idea where it's located. Okay, so Iran's just next door, right? Iran is just next door. Not too difficult to do. Let me show you some of the videos of the strike. Here.
صاروخة الله نازل
اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد.
So you can see in the previous video it said U.S. consulate. Now there were initial reports that they had hit the U.S. consulate there. There have been conflicting reports. The Americans say one thing, the Iraqis say one thing, the Kurds say one thing. I don't think they hit the American consulate. They hit these Israeli bases, or as the Iranians are calling them, Mossad training centers, right? That's what they called them. So this is inside the TV station Kurdistan 24. You can see the moment that the explosions happened, that the missiles hit. We talked about this just yesterday when it happened, as it was happening, and we didn't have enough information. And I told you guys, if it really is Iran, Iran will say it because Iran is not afraid. They just, when they do a strike, they announce that they did a strike. They don't have to hide it or something like the Israelis do. And lo and behold, I was right. The IRGC came out and officially said that they are the ones who hit Erbil with these missiles. And they claimed that the Iranians claimed that they hit a base in a base that's being used by Israel for, quote, conspiracy and mischiefs. I love the description. So basically they wrote this they released this announcement, the IRGC, and they claimed responsibility. And I mean, let me explain something, man. You don't need usually the IRGC to claim responsibility because this is a Cold War. So, you know, the Israelis will go and bomb Syria and they'll kill someone from Iran. And then you'll see inside Syria or Iraq, the militias, the Hashd al-Sha'bi, they will hit an American base in response. But you don't see this on the news, right? It's more of a Cold War because they're not going to enter direct confrontation. You're not going to see Iran and Israel in a direct fight or Syria and Israel in a direct fight. Yeah, I mean, Israel bombed Syria, but still, Syria is limited in its response because they're engaged in a Cold War. Do you understand? So you kill, the Israelis kill some Iranians, the Iranians will hit an American base or an Israeli base or, an American base in Syria. Do you understand how this works? It's always tit for tat. Now, I want to show you who was killed because, again, this strike by Iran was in response to the death of these 2 Iranians. So these are the IRGC officers who were killed by the Israelis in a strike in Syria. Okay? And they were martyred, and that's why Iran hit them back. You might have the Hashd al-Sha'bi, which does these strikes, which is popular mobilization forces or popular mobilization units. You can call them either one, PMU or PMF. And that again, they often do strikes inside Iraq on American bases. And this is significant though this time because Iran is claiming the attack. It's announcing that it did it, and also because it's using ballistic missiles, right? So the last time Iran used ballistic missiles against the Americans in this fashion was when? It was in early 2021, right? So, 2020. So, when Trump assassinated General Soleimani in January 2020, a few days later, the Iranians, they fired a bunch of ballistic missiles at the Ain al-Assad airbase in Iraq. So this is a coalition airbase in Iraq, but it's mostly occupied by Americans. So that's where the Ain al-Assad airbase is. And again, Iran hit that after Trump assassinated Soleimani in response. And no one died because there was some advance warning, I believe. I don't know who did it, but there was an advance warning. And they went hiding, and then they said the Americans had traumatic brain injuries or something like that. But in any case, it appears that yesterday there were no casualties and no traumatic brain injuries either. But it is significant because what the Iranians are saying here is if you kill one of ours, then you're gonna get a response. Usually when the Israelis attack Syria, Syria is unable to respond because Syria doesn't have the equipment. Syria is already fighting a war on multiple fronts in the north with Idlib. Then you have the northeast with the Americans, the south with the Israelis, and you also have Al Tanaf, which is this U.S. airbase in the east. And so Syria doesn't have the capacity. It's already sliced up in 4 pieces and under occupation and in the middle of a war. So it can barely stand on its own 2 feet. But in the case of the Iranians, I mean, they don't take this lightly, even when it's maybe Hezbollah who are killed or Syrians who are killed. Because like I said, there's always a response. This time it was a bigger response, but there's always a response, whether it's through the PMU or directly from Iran. And of course, the PMU, they call them Iran-backed militias. Again, they are backed by Iran, but that's not their only characteristic. It's as the name implies, a popular mobilization unit because it regroups multiple militias of various backgrounds. And, they say it's Shia militias. It's not Shia militias only. You have many other creeds, many, ethnicities, religions that make up the PMU. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And, they often strike back at the Americans when such a thing happens. But I think it's interesting because of the scale of the attack, but also just to highlight to you the Cold War that's happening in the Middle East, because people think that, everything is relatively peaceful and there's no real conflict. No, there absolutely is, and you see that also on the diplomatic level. So if one of Iran's nuclear facilities is hit by the Israelis, Iran will just respond by putting in, replacing the damaged centrifuges with more advanced centrifuges, and then raising the uranium enrichment level to 20 or 60%. And in this case, they also raised the stakes. You want to kill 2 IRGC, then the Iranians are going to take that as a pretext. It's not a pretext. They're going to take that as an attack and respond in kind in due time. And when they did that, the article said that Iran vows revenge. Well, they did it. They certainly did it. A lot of people actually for Soleimani don't consider the strike on the Ain al-Assad base in January 2020 to be the revenge. They say that that's still coming. That's what the Iranians say. And many others, by the way, because again, Soleimani is not just loved in Iran, as much as the New York Times wants you to believe otherwise. He's actually quite popular in most of the Middle East. And so just going back to this attack, even though they launched ballistic missiles at the Ain al-Assad base then, a lot of people don't consider that to have been the full response. And again, I hope you guys understand what a ballistic missile is, because that's not a joke. And just to give you an idea how dangerous and effective and advanced the Iranian ballistic missiles are, they're so advanced that this is one of the reasons Trump quit the nuclear deal, because he said that it doesn't go far enough. They weren't happy limiting Iran's nuclear program. They also wanted to limit the ballistic missiles. And of course, Iran's support for the PMU, for Syria, for Lebanon, Hezbollah, for Yemen, and so on. They actually unveiled in August 2020 a new cruise missile and a new ballistic missile, the Iranians, and they named them after Haj Qasem, so Soleimani, and Abu Mahdi, right? That was during their military parade. And there was also just a few months ago, there was a video that was posted about Iran showing off its ballistic missiles. Let me play that video to you because I don't think everyone understands how effective these things are and dangerous, frankly. I'll just fast forward to the part where they actually launched them. So they're basically enormous rockets. And, of course, the first ballistic missiles were developed by the Nazis. So the Germans in World War II, they developed the V2, which looks like a rocket. You know, when you think of what a rocket looks like, this pencil-shaped thing, that's the V2. That's the first rocket and a ballistic missile, and it's the Nazis who invented that to bomb London with. And they also had the V1 before that, which actually looks like these tiny things over here. It's a tiny drone which self-destructs, right? So they would put just enough fuel for it to fly from the French coast to London, and then when it would run out of fuel, you would hear it go because the engine doesn't have any more fuel, and then it would just randomly fall in London and blow people up. My grandmother was hit by a V1. She's still alive, but yeah, not a great experience. So anyway, this is just giving you some context of how potent these weapons are. And of course, every country has ballistic missiles now. Those who consider themselves to be powers, right? So whether we're talking about Iran, China, Russia, the US, UK, it's not a question of being nuclear, because you also have nuclear. They're called ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Those have actually multiple nuclear warheads. These are not nuclear. They're just conventional ballistic missiles, but they are so dangerous that the West has been trying to think of a nuclear deal 2.0 to include them in there so they can get rid of Iran's program. But I mean, this is just ridiculous. That's never happening in a million years. In any case, that is what they were using. I don't know if it was this specific model, which I just showed you, but this is the kind of armaments that they were using. Erbil is all the way over here. Why are there Israelis in Iraq? You'd be surprised. This is nothing new. We've known for a while that you have Israelis in this particular region. They have a cooperation. You know, they have a history of cooperation with the Kurds. You know, it's not uncommon. Here, just look at this. Very simple. While formal diplomatic relations have not been established, relations between the two polities have existed since the early 20th century. So it's nothing new here. Where I'm not teaching you anything new. But one of the reasons I would expect you have Israelis there, whether it's Mossad or some other division, is of course because they are probably keeping tabs on the PMU. Keeping tabs on, you know, the Iraqi resistance and supporting the Americans maybe in some capacity. I'm just speculating, but it doesn't surprise me at all. Of course, you have Mossad there in Iraq and, you know, the surrounding countries. Nothing surprising here. And I think it's normal that they try and deny it, say like, no, there's no such thing, there's no such base. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. This wasn't about hitting the Americans. This was about hitting the Israelis because they killed 2 men from the IRGC. But you don't hear about this in context in the media because they'll just tell you Iran hit this base or the airport in Erbil, right? And yes, that's true. But what happened? What's going on? What's the situation? What are what's the geopolitical context? There's a Cold War. That's what I'm trying to convey to you, and that's why you should pay attention to these things because it is very interesting. And when Biden, for example, was bombing Syria, you know, within like the first month of his presidency, where did he bomb? He bombed right on the border with Iraq in a region that is known to have a PMU presence, and of course, this is part of that Cold War. So it's very interesting to witness these developments as they're happening. Another reason I obviously don't think it was the Americans is because Iran is trying to negotiate a nuclear deal with the Americans. But, you know, I know they put the nuclear deal on hold, as I was telling you the other day, but the Iranians are not going to go and blow up an American base. That's just stupid. That's not the point. This is just a tit for tat. It's how it is. It's always how it goes.